Broadway show albums. Don't ask why we didn't see what was coming back then. We did always get that Mark was special. And by the way, he got and memorized even the obscure musicals of the era. Baker Street, Stop the World, I Want to Get Off, High Spirits, the one and only original family band. Even as an embryonic gay, he was in his own category. Mark and I would go fishing with our big brothers and catch a toad to keep as a pet and bring home. Within a week, Mark had filled 3 spiral notebooks with his musical about toads called West Side Forest. Our brother Denny was a baseball star, Tony a football hero, Bill a first-string wrestler. Mark played all these sports uncomplainingly, but saw them as if from another galaxy. As we watched a Super Bowl game once, Mark wondered, why don't they just get 2 balls? Then there'd be no fight. There weren't really any role models for Mark on the street we grew up on, or really any specific propelling teachers, not till much later. How did he know in 1966 that what he wanted was the original Broadway cast recording of Cabaret? Scientists? So even as a genius kid, Mark didn't fit the mold. He earned the suspicions of one of our teachers in 3rd grade for a St. Patrick's Day poem he wrote. I remember her confronting him, how would you know a word like Kilkenny? Mark's big, open soul was as enthusiastic an absorber of Warner Brothers cartoons, pogo books, and peanut strips as it was a brainier fare like Kenneth Graham, Emily Dickinson, and Charles Dodson, as he always called Lewis Carroll. That democratic range and tastes stayed with him, marking him as a lively and entertaining an adult creator as he had been a childhood dabbler. I remember his bafflement when our 4th grade teacher flatly refused to let him do a report on the writing of Eleanor Farjeon. The teacher said, no one knows who that is. No one? There was one kid on Cleveland's west side who knew. And it was henceforward everyone else and that peculiar, spectacular Mark O'Donnell. When the rest of us were doodling racing cars and exploding Panzer tanks, Mark was doodling long-lashed zebras and giraffes who introduced themselves as ambassadors from Animal Land. We'd watch TV and Mark would name off the odd character actors as they appeared on screen. That's Grady Sutton. That's Lyle Betker. Oh, Carl Valentine is funny. Alice Ghostly. Jesse White. Well, weirdo, some people would say to Mark, even me, sometimes. But it must be noted that among his sports teammates, with his dad and his brothers, with the local rough pocket knife carrying bullies, Mark was treated rather respectfully. We sensed in our way that he was our blue-collar version of a white buffalo. A cloud of something like enchantment around him, and he, in turn, was never snobby or arrogant. Which made him a bad Harvard man. Well, not bad, but if you haven't heard my leitmotif quite enough here, atypical. Mark was an intellectual who never acted superior, an undergraduate poet who actually wanted you to understand his poems without struggling. As he ventured into what he once jokingly said he wanted to memoirize as my life in, art, Mark found new realms on earth in which to be a stranger. As a gay man, Mark was also a stereotype buster. Uninterested in wardrobe or travel, minimal interest in food and decor. Mark was a wearer of battered shoes and frayed collars. I was very sad to be chastised once for describing Mark's lifestyle, a word he would never use, as like a working-class bachelor. I said that supposing Mark's gayness to be beyond question. But his unstylishness, the soup out of cans, the leftovers, the clumsily self-repaired eyeglasses, A month ago at my niece Caroline's wedding, in the July heat in Virginia, he wore a tweed coat, which did not stop him from leading a lot of little kids in a bunny hop line. I'm just saying that he was a lot more like the single guys that were unmarried back in our old neighborhood, not a denizen of Chelsea galleries and Broadway lobbies, which Mark also was. He was an inveterate user of scrap paper. Any visitor or collaborator was impressed, some were disturbed, by the bulging envelopes, the loose piles of ideas scribbled on irregularly sized odds and ends. He kept his addresses and phone numbers the same way. And the memorial speakers you'll hear this afternoon were written down on such a scrap. This is it. And there's a marginal note that is very Markish. It says, written in the morbid dead of night. No, material success came to Mark too late to change his habits. That's one theory. I don't think they would have ever changed his habits. He never did get a cell phone, despite constant offers from me and others. It was only in the last few years that he got a credit card, and that was a treat to see him produce at a restaurant. I would like to use this card to treat everyone. Should I lay it down? He had a driver's license in his 20s, but he let it lapse without regret. As ever, the friends took up the slack, picking him up, dropping him off, doing legal documents for him, doing all kinds of favors for our luck-bringing white buffalo. Mark could be exasperating, even alarming, in his lack of ease in three-dimensional activities. Every time I saw him undertake to put a chip into chip dip, it was as if he was encountering the concept for the first time. Luckily, loving friends were always there to connect a printer, to change a fuse, to book an airplane flight, or even a train ticket. But I am here to tell you that this so-called real world is overrated. In the world of his imagination and his understanding of emotions, Mark was not just capable, but supremely self-confident, masterful, wise. For a stranger on Earth, Mark sure learned the local language well. Like some Nabokovian expatriate from a more romantic land, he showed us new ways to use the English language. His gift for the inverted aphorism that is somehow truer than the original reflects Oscar Wilde, his cosmic cousin. A novel he wrote at age 36 he called A Coming of Middle Age Story. He felt he'd grown up in our family the low man on the scrotum pole. Normal life that we're all walking through, he called living in a fool's purgatory. A character in one of his books was a prisoner of hope who supposed he'd eventually become bitter and weak enough to escape. He also wrote of a gay man's desire for a smaller, nicer partner as a symptom of repressed heterosexuality. In the briefest of lines, Mark could convey pathos, drama, compassion. He wrote hundreds of what he called Manhattan Zen, haiku short, these specifically distilled moments in his beloved New York City. An example. A run-over rat. Good. Still. My favorite poem of him isn't even a poem, it's a cartoon. One of his simple drawings of a flower in a vase, and it's titled Dragnet Haiku. 11:57 p.m. The White Chrysanthemum. Personally, Mark's sweetness, lovability, and all-around kindness were unimpeachable. But he had weaknesses, flaws, demons, and even in these things, remember, stranger on earth, he stumbled and suffered in a way unique to him. He could be stubborn. Dropping by my apartment once after a long walk, I asked Mark, "What wonders did you see?" Mark was one of the few people you could expect a good answer from on a thing like that. He said, "Oh, something kind of great down in a Times Square souvenir shop window like about a yard-tall statue of George Raft. And I said, no, not George Raft. I know what you're thinking of. I've seen those. It's like Humphrey Bogart or Jack Benny, maybe W.C. Fields. And Mark said, I know what I saw, George Raft. I said, they could never sell enough George Raft. And Mark said, why do you have to second guess me? And it was actually a sore point between us for years. My stranger on earth. He did not want to show me the shop either. Alcohol was his worst problem, at least by immediate practical criteria. And even in this battle, and he tried valiantly for long stretches to overcome it, Mark wasn't like anyone else. He was not good at being alcoholic. He seemed frankly amateurish about it, like a kid with spring fever playing hooky from the world who made himself woozy eating green apples. There was pain inside him and loneliness, not unknown to the single creative soul. And for all the family and friends who loved him, and the romances that came and went, Mark could not quite get to something that was enough. Can any of us? I know that he did know he had the love of many and the love of all you here, and I do feel certain that was his happiest possession. To all of you, for Mark, I say thank you. Yes, he got Guggenheims and grants and a Tony, but let me share one especially meaningful accolade. I was visiting my dad in his 80s and in a nursing home shortly before he passed away. Now, I believe my dad a smart and good man in other ways, but I think he read one book that I know of in his life, a biography of Howard Cosell, given to him by one of the sisters. I mentioned Mark, saying, Mark's still writing away. And my dad, who I wasn't even sure he knew Mark wrote poetry, asked, out of the blue, did you ever read that Zinc Chloride? Zinc Chloride, the poem Mark had written at age 19, 3 decades before, never discussed much. But it sprang from a summer job Mark had in the chemical plant where my dad had worked for 40 years. Set at night with flashes of light from glimpsed furnaces, caution lights on industrial machinery, it was both hellish and gorgeous. The piles of rubble, crushed silicate, the snarl of pipes and tanks. My dad, who maybe knew Casey at the bat, murmured with sincere admiration, Zinc Chloride, he got it. He nailed it. Yes, Mark nailed it. On the page and off the cuff, Mark always nailed it. He did us all a great favor by being the kind of person whose memory is especially portable. So many clean nuggets of his quips, his comments, his silly wonderings, and of his kind gestures and his loving deeds. Mark was like a big kid, but he was also Apollo. He'll be with me forever, and probably you too. Just the same. Goodbye, Mark.